Hello, I'm Cheryl Hansen, and this production is being made for History 820, Liberty University's Teaching History course. Today we're out at the Gettysburg battlefield in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. We're going to be focusing on the battle here, specifically the second day. But the Battle of Gettysburg took place July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1863. And we're going to focus on July 2nd and the fighting that took place here in the Peach Orchard, which is where I'm standing. We're going to focus on one individual in particular, and that would be General Dan Sickles. Dan Sickles was the commander here, and this is where his units were located. But this isn't where he was supposed to be located. Sickles' units were actually supposed to be located behind me, past this. This is the New York Excelsior Monument. His units were supposed to be all the way back there. Sickles chose to move his men 1 mile forward against orders. Sickles and Meade did not get along. He didn't listen to Meade's orders and moved his men 1 mile in front of the Union line. So we're going to go over a little bit of his history. He was a rather arrogant man, not liked by a lot of people. He and his wife, Teresa, lived in Washington, D.C. He was a politician prior to the war. Now, they were known to throw very lavish parties. They were also both known to engage in extramarital affairs. Sickles finds out that his wife, Teresa, is having an affair with Philip Barton Key, son of Francis Scott Key of Star Spangled Banner fame. Sickles goes out, meets up with Key as he's rendezvousing with Teresa, and he shoots and kills him. He dies right in front of the fence at Lafayette Park in Washington, D.C., Lafayette Center. Years later, Sickles will take that fence when they're removing it and replacing it in Washington. He will take the fence where Key died, bring it here to Gettysburg, and use it to divide part of the cemetery here, the National Cemetery. Might give you a little bit of idea of what he's like. So he goes on trial for murder. He's defended by Edwin Stanton, who would become the Secretary of War. And he wins his murder case on the plea of temporary insanity. It's the first time that plea is used successfully in a court of law. So after this, he becomes a pariah in Washington. The lavish parties are no more. People really don't want to associate with him. He's a very difficult man to get along with. He ends up commanding the 3rd Corps, New York. They're all New York men. The monument that's behind me is the Excelsior Monument. It's one of the New York monuments, so this is where these men were roughly located right here. Sickles came back years later and pinpointed where they were located. So this is all the 71st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. This is all the New York infantry, which is part of Sickles' 3rd Corps. 2 months before Gettysburg, Sickles is in Chancellorsville, and he and his men fought very hard to gain a piece of high ground. High ground is, of course, always important. In order to win a battle, you really need the high ground. If you don't have it and someone else does, they're going to win. All right? You need that high point. Sickles fights very hard to get a piece of ground, Hazel Grove, and he gets the ground. But then Commander Joseph Hooker tells him to desert the ground. Very reluctantly, he does leave the ground. The Confederates immediately take it over. The Union loses the battle. Sickles does not forget this. And it probably came into play when he was making decisions here, whether right or wrong. So on July 2nd, he and the 3rd Corps are fighting. The Union line wraps around, comes all the way down through the town of Gettysburg, all the way to the end here. Past these hills you see behind me, the tree line behind me, that is Little and Big Round Top. That is the high ground, and it needs to be defended. Sickles' men are towards the end of this line. He doesn't like his position, so he decides he's going to move his men 1 mile forward, all the way to the road which stands in front of me, and he's going to hold this position. By the time Meade finds out that Sickles has moved, it's too late to bring up reinforcements to fill that line. He has to try to fill that line, but it's too late to pull Sickles back.
To give you a better idea of what I'm talking about, in front of us is a map from the second day of battle, July 2nd. And as you can see, the Union has formed what they called a fishhook. It begins here in the area of Cemetery Hill, and the cemetery is over here, and there's other smaller hills over here. So it's going to come up, wrap around, come all the way down through the town, out into the open ground in front of the Round Tops. This is the high ground in town, the Round Tops. Whoever holds the high ground is going to have the advantage. So the Union line comes all the way down here. As you can see, this yellow line right here, this is where Sickles' 3rd Corps was supposed to be stationed. This is where they're supposed to be located. Sickles decides to move his men up. This is the Emmitsburg Road. On this ridge over here, you have the Confederacy. This is they maintained this line all the way across this ridge during the 3 days of battle. Sickles has now moved his men up far away from the rest of the Union line. He's left the Union line empty here, open here, and he's left the flanks open here. So he's created this huge salient in here, and now he's made them susceptible to collapsing.
This salient that Sickles has created in the Union line, making them very vulnerable to flanking. It could roll the whole line up. And Sickles is now, and his brigade, is now out in the field here, and they are being attacked by General Longstreet of the from the Confederate side, Confederate General Longstreet. So he's coming in. Meade can't pull Sickles back. He knows if he pulls him back, he's going to be attacked by Longstreet in retreat, which would make him even more vulnerable. His entire brigade can be crushed, and the Union line can be rolled up. We are now standing at the Trossel Farm. The area that I was standing in shortly before this, in the peach orchard, is about a half a mile in front of us this way. Where Sickles was supposed to be located towards the end of the Union line is behind me about 1 mile this way. This was Sickles' headquarters. This is the area that he made his headquarters on July 2nd. As he's fighting, as the men are fighting, Sickles is located somewhere right about here. It's not too far from here, and his men are up fighting ahead. Suddenly, a cannonball comes through and takes off most of Sickles' leg. It's hanging by threads, and he needs to be taken off the field. He's taken back here to a field hospital near this farm, and he'll be then taken to one of the Corps hospitals. His leg will have to be amputated. So he loses his right leg from the knee down, or just above the knee down, he loses that leg. As he's taken off the field, he's coolly smoking a cigar, encouraging the men that are retreating in some cases, but he's encouraging his men. He wants to be cool and collected at all times. Sickles always has to be in control. And even at this moment where his leg is hanging off, he's very much in control. So he was a very strong man. He thought he always very narcissistic. So he always thought he was doing the right thing. He knew what he was doing. He gets taken off the field, leg is amputated. He demands that he be taken to Washington immediately. Now, the reason he wants to go to Washington immediately is because he knows if he gets his story there first, it's more likely to be believed. He's going to go to Washington and tell him, I saved the battle, this is what I did. It's rather difficult getting him to Washington because where we're standing now, there were at least 88 dead horses in front of the Trossel house. Cannon and wagons were ruined. They were destroyed, laying all over the ground. Finding a horse and wagon to take him to the nearest railroad depot, because this one had been taken out of commission. The Confederates had destroyed the line here, would not be fixed for several days. They end up getting him to Washington, and he does exactly what I had said that he does. He goes to Lincoln, and he speaks to him and tells him how it was his actions that helped win Gettysburg, because of course this was a Union victory the next day. Sickles was gone by the time Pickett's charge took place and the battle ends. He also speaks to many of the commissioners of war because he knows he can have influence with them by telling him how well he did here. For the rest of his life, he will insist he is the hero of Gettysburg. So the question I have, or the question that's posed is, was Sickles correct in his actions? By moving his men out of near the end of the Union line that was defending Little Round Top and Big Round Top, the high ground in this town, was he correct in moving his men forward 1 mile? He insisted that by moving them up to that point, all the way up to the Emmitsburg Road, that when the Confederates came across the ground and across that road, the fighting with his 3rd Corps fighting with those men would help soften them. It would take out a lot of their men, and it would help prevent them from hitting the Union line with full force. It would then weaken them, so it would give them a better chance of winning. Meade was furious and he never forgave Sickles for his actions. And Meade always said, no, he weakened the Union line. He had to frantically pull men from other places to try to fill the gap in the line, to try to support the end of the Union line near the Round Tops. And if you've ever seen the movie Gettysburg, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain's grand charge down the hill to defend that hill, that high ground, he was only one of many. Some of the New York men were still up there. Patty O'Rourke's men were up there. There's a large monument up there to them. And there were a lot of other men in that area that were fighting to defend that hill. Had Sickles been in front of that hill, in the valley area in front of it, he would have helped protect that hill, and they would not have had to scramble to defend it. At least that's my side of the story. You can decide for yourself. Most of the Rangers here that I've spoken to, they do believe that Sickles was wrong. I've met very few people that believe that he was right. So that's up to you. But I hope you've enjoyed visiting the Gettysburg battlefield with me, and I thank you very much.